So that's a pretty basic example of editing. Pauline's show, a lot of it is ready to go as it is. So let's say we've got a slightly more complex example to work on. So we're going to click in our timeline, just kind of anywhere, it doesn't matter. Press M to open our media browser again. So this will be more of the intermediate editing stuff. So let's go to our downloads folder. And let's take another one of these. So let's say we're pulling in an episode of Medical Matters just because we want to use a portion of it. So we can grab whatever we need to out of this media browser, and let's grab one of these pieces of music too. And then we can click M to hide it. Now we've got a situation where we've got a bunch of editing that we need to do. So let's say we want this music to play underneath this Annuals in the Fall here. But it looks like we've got something else on the same track that is, just a little bit quieter. So there's a couple of different ways we can deal with this. If we want to, we can just pull this up to its own track. That way, if it's too loud, we can pull the volume just on that one track down. However, if there's, for whatever reason, two clips that you want on the same track, maybe it's somebody that just spoke way too loud, or it's just a single part where something went wrong with the recording, or it's just an example where you've got a song coming after something else and you want them both to be there, but one is too loud. You can't turn down this because we don't want to turn this down because it's already at an okay volume. So what we can do is double click on the clip that we want to deal with. There's a whole ton of options in here. You can ignore everything in here except this right here, volume. So you're going to click this and you can turn this down by 2 or 3. Then you can click OK, and you can see it got a little smaller. So if you need to do it again, we can do it again. Turn it down by a whole bunch more this time, and click OK, and now you can see it's a lot quieter than it was. So if you need to ever edit just a single clip without affecting everything else on the track, that's how you do it. You just double click on it and it'll get you access to all this. If you say need this back to 0, you can just double click on it at any time. So I pull it down, I'm at -46. I go, whoa, what was it supposed to be? Oh, it was supposed to be just right there. You can try and click and drag it and get it at exactly 0, but you're probably going to have a hard time getting it exactly there. So you can just double click on the button, snaps it to 0, hit OK, and it's right back to the way it was. So I'm going to get rid of that one for now, and we're going to take another example of this Medical Matters. So if we're zooming in here, there are a few more commands that I didn't get into with the basic editing. So this is kind of more of the intermediate stuff. So you got the double click to get advanced file options, or the volume for individual clips. This also gives you some more advanced options. So these will be keyboard shortcuts. So you already know that there's one. E will split whatever is underneath the editing cursor. So you can split things with that. Once you've split something, you can move it out if you want to. Control Z or Command Z is undo. You can also get these things from these menus, undo up here. You can also cut something with X, so that will cut it out, and then you can paste it with V. So cut and paste. You can also, if you don't want to cut it out, if you wanted just another version of that, you could C to copy, and then again V to paste, and that will paste it over there. So that will cut. So you might find that you want to click on something and you want to delete it, and you go over to the backspace, or you click delete or edit, delete, whatever. That will take a little bit of time. If you want to get really fast, if you want to just fly through your editing and not spend that much time with it, you might find that X to cut is a faster version of delete. Because it'll let you cut a whole bunch of things in a row, and like I said, Control Z, Command Z will undo, and you can get back all the stuff that you've done. So I can even undo further and undo a bunch of these cuts that I made in there. So now I'm back to my original pristine file. So I'm going to make another little cut in it over here. I'm going to drag this out to show a couple other shortcuts. So let's say this is just a clip, like maybe it's a sound effect or something that I'll use in the background, and I just want to fade in and fade out quickly. What you can do is you can grab the end, drag in a fade, grab the other end, drag in a fade. Make sure that you're up on the fade tool. But the issue with that is you have to make sure you're on the fade tool. Sometimes you'll accidentally grab the trim tool, instead of grabbing the fade and pulling it in. You'll grab the trim, or you might grab the move and then you move it into the wrong spot, and then you have to, undo, and you're going, this is driving me crazy. There's a couple of shortcuts. So if you want to fade, you can click to the point that you want to fade to and hit D. If you want to fade out, you can click the point that you want to start the fade out from and hit G. So do that one more time. It's the same thing as clicking this and dragging it to whatever point you want. So you can do it with the mouse. You can click and drag it. Or the other way is you can click where you want that fade to finish and hit D. Then you can click where you want the fade to start, fade out, and hit G. So D is fade in, G is fade out, and what happens if we hit F? Nothing, I guess. Okay, so that is for fades. If you wanted to make, say, a cut, say we didn't need this section right here, you could, like I showed you before, grab it with the trim tool, pull it in a little bit until you get to just the part that you want. If you want to be super speedy, you can click to the part that you want to cut and then hit the A button to cut the part that you're hovering your mouse over. You can then click where you want and S to trim the end. So we'll go over that one more time. If you wanted to trim the start, you can trim it with the mouse with the trim tool on the edge. Same over here, you get the trim tool, the little staple looking thing, by hovering over the edge with your mouse. Then you click and drag. But you can also do the same thing by clicking with by clicking on a point that you want to, where you want the cut to start. You can click on the point that you want to trim to and then hit the A key on your keyboard. And because you can potentially have, like a bunch of clips over top of one another or happening at the same time as one another, if you use E, you'll be separating all of them. So it's sometimes a pain in the butt to use that. Sometimes you would maybe rather use the A and S keys. And the reason I say that is because they'll only affect the one that the mouse is currently over. So you can see right now, if I click here and I press E, it separates everything that this green line touches. But if I press A, it's just going to cut the one that my mouse is on top of. Same if I press S, it just cuts the one side of the one my mouse is over top of. You've also got one more option for making separations. So like we've shown before, if you wanted to split this into two spots, click and place the green line wherever you want the separation to be. You can press E to make that separation. But let's say, we found, let's say this lump right here was just a cough, and we didn't want that at all. What we can do is click and drag to make a selection in time. So that's a left click and drag to make a selection in time, and then hit B, and that will separate that out. So then you can X to cut it if you want, and then pull this over, and it'll automatically fade. So it'll be a nice clean transition. Same over here. If we want, get rid of this whole thing, B splits it out, X will cut it, click and drag that one over. So you can find that you'll probably get pretty quick once you get this workflow down. So click and drag, B, X, click and drag. Click and drag, B, X, click and drag. And again, if you want to, if you know like this whole section here, I asked somebody a question and I don't want to use that entire question. We talked about stuff we shouldn't have. You can just press E, that'll make the cut, and then you can figure out where that next cut needs to be. So maybe, the question goes up until here. So then you can press E again, and then just delete that whole section and click and drag that in. And that is all of your intermediate editing tips. The final tip is an advanced editing tip, and this is one that I would leave aside until you're really, really comfortable with all of the other things that I've been talking about. So you don't necessarily need to use the keyboard shortcuts. If you're not a fan of shortcuts, if you like to just do stuff with the mouse, wait until you see the trim tool to trim, wait until you see the fade tool to do fades, that's all good. That's totally fine, and you can use those things with this advanced tip too. But I just want you to be comfortable with the way this program works. You want to kind of know your way around before you turn this next thing on, because this can potentially make a dog's breakfast of your whole episode. So you saw me kind of going through this and saying, okay, well, we're at a point where, I know this is a cough, so I'm just going to select this, hit B to separate it, X to delete it, and I'm going to click and drag this over. And I said, this will get you pretty quick at doing all this editing stuff. This next tip is a way to speed that process up even further. However, it does a bunch of things behind the scenes that make it a little bit confusing for people. So this icon up here, it's a whole bunch of squares. Click it once and it'll turn light green. Click it twice and you'll see a whole bunch of them are green. So I'll show you again. It's gray, just the little gray square in the middle. The rest of them are all empty squares. Then we click it again and we've got 2 green squares, but the rest of them are all empty squares. Click it again and it's almost all full green squares. So what this is a process called ripple editing. The way ripple editing works is just the same way we would make this selection, separate it with the B key, and cut it with X, and it leaves this space here. We're going to click this and drag it over to close up that space. That last step, dragging it over and filling up this empty space, that is what ripple editing does for us. So if we have ripple editing enabled, you can see we'll make that same click, B to separate, X, and we don't have that space anymore because it automatically pulled that closed. So I'll do a little more of a showcase. So let's say that's our thing. We make a cut there, we delete it, make a cut there, we delete that. We make our selection by clicking and dragging with the left mouse button, press B to separate, press X to cut. And we've got a whole bunch of empty spaces here where we now have to go, okay, well, there were a bunch of coughs. I cleared my throat a bunch of times. So I'll just click all these over and line them up. And okay, we'll go over here. Okay, we'll just line that up. And okay, that seems like it'll work. Ripple editing removes that process for you. So it's great, it's a time saver, but if you're not noticing that it's on and you start editing, for instance, if you have an interview where you've got the host and the guest on 2 separate tracks and you ripple edit the host track without ripple editing the interview track, the guest track, then you're going to shift them out of time, and all of a sudden the host's questions aren't lining up with the guest's answers anymore, or you can hear there's a double, there's a little bit of an echo or something. Those are all signs that you've had a ripple edit go wrong. So if you've got a show for instance, Medical Matters, like we're cutting up right now, or if you've got a show like Pauline's show, it's not a bad one to use ripple editing on because you've only really got the one track in there. Certain other shows, if you've got 2 voices or, 2 voices plus sound effects plus music, then potentially, you could be messing up some timing. And like you've seen, sometimes you want to have a lot of cuts, sometimes you need to do a lot of edits. And if you've done a lot of edits and you've got ripple editing on, sometimes it's faster to start the entire episode over again than it is to try and undo all the mistakes and the timing issues that ripple editing causes. So that's why I recommend that you leave this off. So leave this a gray, until you feel comfortable with that idea, until you feel comfortable with all of the basic editing functions of Reaper. Until you know what you're doing with those, you can leave ripple editing off. But once you do feel comfortable with that, and once you feel like you're ready for it, it is a big time saver, particularly for podcasts or for really any spoken word content. If there's anything that doesn't have to keep timing to a beat or keep timing to a picture or a video signal, then ripple editing is just a massive time saver. But like I said, use it wisely, use it cautiously.